This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
What's up, Detroit sports fans? Welcome to the Fan Reporter Show, made by fans for fans, powered by the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I'm Nick, and joining us today is Anderson to give us this week's topics.
We have some hires to talk about with the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions officially announced a new GM, and have all but officially announced a new head coach as well. And I think the coach even has his own coordinator hire as well in the works. So we've got a lot of Lions talk about, and a little bit of Pistons to mix in there as well. It's a fan report.
I do technically think it is almost official with Dan Campbell. I don't think they've had the official...
Yeah, they haven't officially said it, because in the Brad Holmes presser, they even said the search is still ongoing. Like, they wouldn't even say the name.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Considering we all have the name. They've already named a DC.
Exactly.
That doesn't make any sense. I guess considering maybe they haven't put pen to paper yet, and there's always the possibility of the whole situation with, was it the Colts last year with the Patriots OC, Josh McDaniels? Or not last year, a couple of years ago, where he was the coach and then he wasn't the coach.
Yeah,
and,
backed out.
Yeah.
I think that was the same year we hired Patricia, or the year after, I want to say.
It was one of those years, yeah. So, as expected, everything kind of fell in place. Once the first domino fell, all the other dominoes began to fall this past week. We saw the hiring of a GM in Brad Holmes, who we talked about briefly earlier last week in regards to, he was the director of college scouting for the Los Angeles Rams. Has been with that organization for, I believe it was like 17 years or something like that. He still is younger than some out there. He's not, a 65-year-old guy as far as I know. He's pretty young. So there is that aspect of things, considering, he's only 41. One of the things that has honestly worried me about going after some of these old names, like, some of the old names out there, like, what's his face? The guy that we were going to try to get, I can't remember his name, but the guy who was the Browns GM at one point, the Chiefs GM at one point, a lot of these older... And not saying that you shouldn't hire an older, experienced GM, but a lot of these older faces in the game tend to be stuck in their old ways and their old habits, and they refuse to progress and evolve with the game. And so Brad Holmes is the guy that is very much into the new style of football, the new way to construct a roster and build a championship team. So that's something that I'm at least looking forward to. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a guy that you and I were overly excited about. We had the names out there that we did really want, and they were all still in play. But Brad Holmes was a name that we both had said that we wouldn't be upset, but we wouldn't be bouncing off the walls excited. So Now that we have officially hired and announced Brad Holmes as the general manager of this football team, Andrew, what are your thoughts? I'm curious to gauge your interest. Curious to gauge, how do you feel about it?
So,
are you disappointed? Are you happy?
Again, let's say this. Going into his press conference, I really was. I don't want to say lukewarm, but I was like, okay. I mean, that works. I don't love it. I don't hate it. I was hoping for a bigger splash, but this guy checks off a lot of boxes on paper. It's just I also kind of want a big name selfishly. But when you look at Brad Holmes, I mean, the big thing that everyone in Detroit media has been writing about him, been saying about him, every Lions fan has been saying about him, is how well he was able to scout and find talent that would go in the middle rounds of drafts. And obviously that's something that the Lions haven't been very good at in recent years. That's something I shouldn't even say recent years.
Bob Quinn especially struggled with, and I mean that goes back a while.
But what's actually upping my excitement meter on Brad Holmes a bit, and I shouldn't even say excitement, it's just opening my positivity on him a bit, is actually a lot of what I heard from the presser. And that's he came in and just was honest and didn't try to sugarcoat what we have going on here.
This team is better than a 9-7 team.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he straight up admitted that this is something that's going to have to be retooled. When asked about Matthew Stafford, he was non-committal, and you're not going to ask him to say, yeah, we're getting rid of it. The best you can hope for is non-committal. So this
if
is a
you're
guy
in the
who's
camp
not
of wanting him to be not here next year, yes, which you and I both are in agreement that it's been great, but the time has come.
If you, like you said, if you're in the camp of wanting Stafford, if you're in the camp of wanting to just restart this thing from the ground up. You want a guy who's not going to come in, be in love with this roster, and just try to be like, we're there. We just need to make a couple tweaks. Like it was refreshing to see that he could tell that this roster, like anyone who watches football could probably tell, that this roster wasn't cutting it, especially on defense. So I am a little more hopeful after this press conference than I was before the press conference. So I'll leave it there. I'm hoping, and I'm hopeful that he's a guy that's going to make the right decisions from what it sounds like at this point.
Now, you mentioned he's a guy who knows it, who's not in love with this roster, and he probably is looking more towards a rebuild here. However, I mean, his own words later on in the press conference kind of contradict that. They say some things along the lines of, and I'll even use a direct quote here, when you get into the offseason, every franchise look at the areas that they might need some, let's say, retooling at, areas that need to be addressed. But the ultimate goal is to make sure that the most competitive team is on the field, and that starts right this year in entering 2021 season. Not viewing this as, oh, this will be long term. I don't know how long it's going to take. That's not the approach. That's not the mindset going into it. The approach is to make sure that we can put the most competitive team possible out there on the field in 2021. So that kind of tells me and leads me to believe that he's looking at more of a retool as opposed to a rebuild, which means that we may see some components of this roster and may see a lot of components of this roster return.
I'd hope a lot of the components of this offense are still in place. I'd like our offense. But again, I don't think you're ever going to see a GM come out and straight up say, we're going to rebuild this thing from the bottom up. GMs
do come in and say, look, this organization hasn't been successful in recent years. This roster's not good the way it is. We need to build it and make it back to where we want to be. There's GMs that come in and say that things aren't where we want to be, so we're going to make it better.
I think he said, obviously he didn't say a lot of things explicitly, but that's like what I got from was when he said, for example, that he wants to go through and he's going to evaluate every single position. It's not like there's anyone that's kind of off limits on this roster. That's made me think, okay, he's actually going to take hopefully a clean, open-minded look at this roster and give it an honest, hopefully makeover, but at least an honest shot at remaking it.
Yeah, I mean, I can get on board with that. Like I said, I'm not in love with this roster in the makeup that it is. I think that there is a lot of areas that they need to improve on. I think there's a lack of talent on this roster. We don't have a ton of real high-end talent. Sure, the offense has got some nice pieces. There's some really good pieces to build with there, and with the offensive line and Frank Ragnow and Taylor Decker's a solid, above average to sometimes good left tackle that's under contract for a while. Jonah Jackson looks like he could be a player. And we know about DeAndre Swift, Kenny Galladay, if he comes back. TJ Hawkinson had a big year. So, yes, there is some talent on this roster. But when you look at the defense side of the ball, it's devoid. Like, you need an entire rebuild back there. We don't need just a retool. We need to kind of build things from the ground up there. And a lot of the pieces that were good on that defense, I believe, are no longer under contract. They're free agents. I think Romeo Okwara was in a contract here, wasn't he? And I believe he racked up 10, 11 sacks this year. So, and the guys that are under contract are guys like Trey Flowers that underperformed drastically from what we had hoped they would be. So there's going to be a lot of need to play with the pieces that we have, and if, what's movable, what's not, what can we get rid of, what do we have to keep, and go with that. But I am encouraged a little bit by Brad Holmes and his non-committal sense to bringing Matthew Stafford back. I like that fact. I like that possibility that, hey, what I think is going to happen is I think that they're going to see what's out there for Matthew Stafford. They're going to see what we can get for him. If there's nobody on this roster right now, in my mind, that I would consider to be untouchable in Brad Holmes' eyes, and that encourages me because I really don't think there are anybody who should be untouchable. Everybody, it should be shopped around for the right price. And if someone comes along that, say the 49ers or the Broncos or the Colts or whoever comes along and says, hey, here's X draft picks, we want Matthew Stafford. If Brad Holmes is willing to pull the trigger and has the autonomy to do so, that's the other big thing is I want to see some signs that he has the autonomy to make decisions with this roster and not have Rod Wood and Sheila Ford meddling into it. I want him to be able to make decisions.
A couple different reporters tried to ask him, try to ask Sheila and Rod Wood about that during the presser, and both times they were just like, he will work together with the head coach and they will make decisions together. But like they wouldn't actually talk about but will they be able to make decisions on their own without without ownership intervening.
And that's what worries me. And that's why part of the reason I am starting to believe Matthew Stafford is going to be back is because in the interview process, I have a feeling that one of the big keys for Rod Wood and Chris Spielman, who loves Matthew Stafford, and Sheila Ford was, what are your thoughts of Matthew Stafford and your willingness to bring him back? And that's one of the ways that they were going to look for a GM is who's willing to bring him back. And that's kind of what worries me here is because that just means that people who don't know football, aren't football minds, don't know the ins and outs on how to build a roster, are meddling in roster decisions. And we can't have that. We can't have that here in this city right now with the way that the roster's shaped up. There's so many moves that need to be made, and Brad Holmes needs to have the autonomy to be able to make the decisions. And if Matthew Stafford does end up coming back, in the back of my mind, I am going to feel like how much pressure did Sheila Ford, Rod Wood, and Chris Spielman put on Brad Holmes to bring him back? Was he allowed to make that decision on his own, or did they push him to this decision? And if he trades him, sweet. If he trades him, sweet. Then that probably means he has the autonomy because we've got no signs from any of those three key pieces in the front office and ownership that they are wanting to trade Matthew Stafford away. So that tells me that Brad Holmes has full autonomy with this roster and the way it's built. And that's what I want to see. But time will tell. There are encouraging pieces to the Brad Holmes hiring. He is a guy who likes building a new age style of football roster. He obviously has success in drafts or in scouting college players especially in the middle rounds. With the Rams, they were very successful in those rounds, and he was a big part of that. They were also successful up at the top of the draft and getting guys like Aaron Donald. There's a lot of positives to look at in Brad Holmes' tenure with the Rams, and hopefully he can bring that over to Detroit and be successful here, especially in the draft, because that's where they need to be successful.
Now, and I think this is a perfect segue, too. Brad Holmes, he actually came out and said also in the pressure that he's never, in terms of what he likes in a coach, he said he's never preferred an offensive-minded or defensive-minded coach. The number one quality he looks for in a head coach is being a leader of men. Now, while that clearly fits Robert Saleh, so hoping we would get,
it's Robert Saleh.
It's looking like we are going to be bringing in Dan Campbell as the head coach, who also fits that description, except the difference is Dan Campbell's not a play caller.
No,
he's never held a coordinator position.
Right.
He did take over for Joe Philbin for a little bit in Miami as an interim head coach, but
he was also the assistant head coach in New Orleans. He was one of Sean Payton's right-hand men, so he did have some power there, even if he only was a tight ends coach and wasn't a coordinator. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to hire a coach that's a play caller. That could just mean that whoever he puts in place as the defensive coordinator and the offensive coordinator are calling the plays, and that's okay with me. I want my head coach to focus on being a leader of men, managing the game, not managing just the offense or just the defense, managing the game and getting his team out there ready to play and always being ready to play. And that's
my big word when we talked about him on the last pod, it really boiled down to that was there's just so much uncertainty there. It's really hard to be excited about a guy like Dan Campbell. Do you agree with that?
Yes and no. I've heard nothing but positives about Dan Campbell from a lot of different people that have talked about him in the media.
Well, that is true.
I've heard a lot of positives from people who have talked about him over in New Orleans as well, and other players out there. People like to play for him. He's got a lot of connections in this league with a lot of different people. He will be able to bring in the staff that he wants in this city, which that's encouraging right there alone. And players want to play for him. That's the other thing is players want to play for Dan Campbell, and that's something that we can't say we had here in Detroit for the last 3 years in Matt Patricia. Players didn't want to play for him, and hopefully that means that players will play up for Dan Campbell. So there are some things to be excited about there. He's going to be able to get, with the connections that he has and the rapport that he has, he's going to be able to develop the coaching staff that he wants to have, that he envisions. And he's going to be able to bring in some talent here and have these players get excited to play for him, not just Monday through Saturday, but also on Sunday too. And that's important in my mind, and that's really kind of what we needed out of a head coach because it's such a far cry away from what we had in Matt Patricia. It's similar to what we had in Jim Caldwell, which was honestly the best football that we've seen this team play in a decade. So it's similar there, but hopefully Dan Campbell can manage a game a little bit better. So, I mean, there are a lot of positives to look at with Dan Campbell. Is he the hottest name out there? Was he the Robert Salehs, the Eric Bieniemys? No, he wasn't. That's
we
clear.
didn't even interview Eric Bieniemy, I don't think.
I believe we did, but I don't think anything came out of it. I don't think any real news. I don't know that Eric Bieniemy was all that interested in the position.
Well, we couldn't have because he's still in the playoffs.
That's true. That's true. That's another reason. That's actually, you're right. You're right. But the whole Robert Saleh thing, I think that came down to the fact that he just didn't interview well here in Detroit, and they decided to go a different route. And albeit I am disappointed, I would have loved to see Robert Saleh come here and be the leader of men in this city and coming home basically to coach this football team. It's the perfect.
How bitter will you be if he turns the Jets around?
Very, 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 very. Because it would have been so prophetic to see him come to Detroit, back to his hometown, and where he played high school ball and lead this and turn this franchise around. Like it would have just been amazing.
Someone who just knows how historically bad this franchise is. Like,
it literally, if he would have brought if he would have come here and brought this team to a Super Bowl, there would have been a 30 for 30 made about him.
Oh, absolutely.
100%. Coming home.
There's going to be 30 for 30 about anyone who makes it to
You're not wrong. But either way, there are things to be excited about with Dan Campbell, and I am hearing a lot of good things about him. So there is stuff to be hopeful about. Is he the best X's and O's guys out there? No. He's most likely not, considering he's never called plays in his tenure as a coach in the NFL. But that doesn't mean that he won't put the right people in place who are X's and O's gurus to be able to call plays for the offense and defense and be successful.
And I remember I did see a clip online, and he was coaching, I want to say this was Miami, if I remember the clip correctly, but he was coaching up a tight end who failed to block on the field, and the tight end came out of bounds, and Dan Campbell let him hear it, basically. He got in his ear, like he yelling at him, like that he needs to be blocking out there. Like he can't just sit and stare at the runner. And tight end goes over to the bench and sulks. And then Dan Campbell follows him over and then basically gets in his ear again, like, hey, are you just going to sulk or are you going to get up and actually perform? Like, this is where we know who you are. What you do after this is where your career is made. So, like, I want you to get up and show me who you are, not just sulk. And then he goes up and then, like, it shows in the next play and like goes up and makes a play. And, like, I mean, at least he's a guy, like you said, at least he's a guy. I mean, that kind of motivated me just watching it.
He's a motivator. He's a leader of men, and he's a guy that players want to play for, and that's important, especially in this city. And again, that's what we need out of a head coach. Honestly, I prefer that type of head coach, a guy who is a leader of men, who gets his guys going, that not necessarily has to be an X's and O's guy, as long as he puts the right people in place that can be the X's and O's guys. And we already got one domino fallen in that situation. We have hired believed to have hired a defensive coordinator. He didn't exactly put out an extended search for a defensive coordinator there.
Because that was going to be my next question. Like, how far do you think his reach extends in the NFL, considering, like, he's not, like, one of the bigger coaches out there?
From what I have heard, he has extremely good connections in the NFL. He's got very good rapport with a lot of different people. He's able to get any coach that he wants. If there's a coach out there that he wants to join this coaching staff, I've heard nothing but the possibility that he will get that guy. Yeah. That he's got great connections in this league.
And if we do want to move on to talk about this, really the only knock I have on naming Aaron Glenn the DB coach for defensive coordinator as the defensive coordinator. I mean, the DB coach for the New Orleans Saints as a defensive coordinator. Really, the only knock I have is it doesn't seem like this was an extensive search. But then when you look at who you're getting, I mean, this is a guy who led a secondary that was top 5 in passing.
Pretty much any year he's been there.
So it's the product on the field speaks for itself in terms of Aaron Glenn. So I'm hoping that translates to an entire defense, not just a secondary. But the secondary has been a huge low point for our defense. So there is that hope that he could help turn that around. And he has, from what I'm hearing, he has Jeff Okudah connections. Jeff Okudah tweeted that he's his 7-on-7 coach of the opening back in high school. So he does have some connections to Jeff Okudah. So maybe he'll be able to tap into him. We'll see. But I do like that. I do like bringing him in. I don't have any issues with it.
No, I like the Aaron Glenn signing as well. The thing I liked about it was the fact that Dan Campbell pointed him out as a guy that he wanted to bring in here. And it's not like Aaron Glenn is it's not like it's easy to leave an organization that has constant success year over year in New Orleans. Like, it's not easy to leave a job like that. So for a guy like Aaron Glenn, who has a good job out there, does really well, to come here and say, hey, I'm willing to take on a project with you and rebuild this thing with you. And that tells me right there that people want to not only play for Dan Campbell, but also coach with Dan Campbell. And that gives me hope and a lot of excitement. And also, again, talking about Aaron Glenn, I mean, the guy's had extreme success with the New Orleans Saints. They've had a great pass defense year over year over year, and he's a big reason for that. He coaches those DBs up, and hopefully he can do that here in Detroit as well, because we know damn well the DBs in this town need some work. And we've got a really young cornerback with a ton of potential in Jeff Okudah that we drafted very high in the draft last year that needs some coaching. And hopefully Aaron Glenn can be that guy. He's a former cornerback in the league who knows a thing or two, and it's evident based on how he's coached the Saints defensive back. So hopefully he can teach a thing or two to a guy like Jeff Okudah. Hopefully Tracy Walker can pick up some things and continue to develop as well. He looks like he could be a fine safety in this league. So again, I love the Aaron Glenn hiring as well. Like you mentioned, the only thing that worries me is it doesn't really seem like there was very much of an extended search put out there.
Yeah.
But that just tells me that the guy had a target as to who he wanted, and he went after him and got him. And that's good in my eyes.
And one other positive I take from this, and it actually applies to Dan Campbell as well, is, and I've talked about this on previous episodes of this podcast, is how much of a bias I kind of have towards coaches who were formerly players or GMs who were formerly players, and just their ability to connect to the players on their roster. You have a former Pro Bowl cornerback now in Aaron Glenn. You have a former tight end in Dan Campbell. These are guys who are former players that can probably do a better job of earning the respect of the players that they're coaching.
There is a certain level of respect that players give guys who have played in the league and had experience in this league can afford that they afford from current players in the league. They're able to level with them and say, hey, I know what you're going through. I know what's going through your head right now, but this is how you get past that. This is how you get around that. This is how you power through. It's another reason to believe that these are guys that we want to be leading this football team. So, but I do have a question for you, and it's switching over to the other side of the ball. We obviously still don't have an offensive coordinator.
I still have a question for you too, so let's see what yours is.
There was a guy who hired for the head coaching position who was our interim head coach for this past season. If Dan Campbell were to bring back Darrell Bevell as the offensive coordinator of this team, would you be excited about that, or would you have Jim Bob Cooter flashbacks? Considering that's another situation who, when that head coach was fired, the new one was brought in, he stuck around. And I think a lot of that had to do with the front office kind of pushing his hand there. Would you be happy with Darrell Bevell coming back, considering it's probably the front office pushing that decision?
Here's the thing. I don't hate what Darrell Bevell did with the offense once he was given free reign once Patricia left. So, like, just on paper, knowing what the offense would look like with him coordinating it, calling the plays, I don't hate that product. At the same time, my one knock on the defensive coordinator hire is the fact that it doesn't seem like this is an extensive search. It'd be the same thing with the Darrell Bevell hire. Like, I kind of want Dan Campbell to at least try to find his own guy, but it's not the worst thing in the world if you were to bring Darrell Bevell back, but I wouldn't be excited about it. I just would be, okay, I know what we're getting. Let's hope the defense is a lot better, kind of thing.
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree. I like Darrell Bevell as an offensive coordinator. I think he's a solid coach, and I think he's a solid play caller. Again, it's going back to the autonomy thing, though, with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, is how much autonomy do they have in making this decision? I would hope that they would be given the autonomy to be able to put the coaching staff that they want together. Now, the big difference between keeping Jim Bob Cooter and if we were to keep Darrell Bevell is the GM was the same when they retained Jim Bob Cooter, and it's obviously not the same in this situation. Rob Quinn had a year of Jim Caldwell before he fired him, and then they kept the OC. Versus now, that's not the case. So I mean, it would worry me a little bit, but at the same time, it would, because like you mentioned, they didn't really put out an extended search out there. But again, and also that again though, I still believe, based on what I've heard, that Dan Campbell's a guy who has connections in this league where if he wants a guy, he's gonna go get him, and they're gonna come here. So that right there tells me that if Darrell Bevell does come back, then that was a guy he wanted, and that I'm okay with. And so I would be happy with that. Again, I liked what Darrell Bevell did with this offense at times. There were games, a la the Panthers game, where things looked god-awful. But there were times where after Patricia was fired where things looked better and the offense looked like it was firing on all cylinders. And hopefully we have an uncorked version of Darrell Bevell if he does return as the offensive coordinator. Hopefully we have an uncorked version of that to where, hey, this can be successful here. But either way, do you have any targets in mind for an offensive coordinator? Are there any names out there you'd say, hey?
I don't know if I have a specific name in mind. I kind of have a prototype in mind, and it's more along the lines of, okay, we're taking a chance on the defensive coordinator, but I like the chance we're taking because this is a guy that we don't know if he's an X's and O's guy. He's never been a coordinator in the NFL, but I like the product that he's put on the field with that secondary in New Orleans. Now, when we come to the offense, I don't know if I want to be taking chances at both positions, and I kind of want a more proven play caller at the offense coordinator position. And I'll probably get a little bit worried unless it's a situation where he coached some of the best running back groups in the NFL, or something like that, or some of the best wide receiver corps. But with knowing what Dan Campbell's shortcomings are, which is being an X's and O's guy, you kind of need to make up for that at the coordinator position. So I would really want a guy with a proven track record as a play caller at the offensive coordinator spot. With that being said, I don't know if Doug Peterson would be willing to be OC. I did like some of what he did on offense in Philly.
That's an interesting name.
Yeah, right?
You don't think that would ruffle some feathers in the locker room, considering he shattered his reputation in Philly, and he apparently had zero rapport with a lot of the groups over there, and the whole tanking situation. You don't think that would ruffle some feathers and upset some people in the locker room?
You're right. Forget I said that. The whole tanking situation probably ruffled some feathers.
I mean, there's names out there like
I was just trying to think of a name of someone who's gone who lost their job, who I actually felt ran a competent offense this year.
I mean, the biggest name that you're not going to get a guy who was already an OC in this league, or is currently an OC in this league, I should say, unless it's Darrell Bevell. It's going to be a guy that is in the waiting, so to speak. One name I've seen come up a lot is even a guy who could be looked at as a head coach potentially, but he's currently the Chiefs quarterback coach and passing game coordinator in Mike Kafka. That's a guy that would be really intriguing. Granted, that one's a total long shot because as far as I've been hearing, he's straight up been turning down interviews to be potentially a head coach, let alone an offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. So I don't think Mike Kafka's in the realm of possibilities, but that would be kind of the typical guy that I'd be looking at, a guy who is aggressive and has experience coaching a young quarterback and developing him into an elite level type player. Because fact of the matter is, we could be looking at a rookie quarterback next year or the year after that under center here in this city. And so I want a guy as an OC, as an offensive mind that works well with quarterbacks and develops them into what they can be. Mike Kafka would be one of those guys. Another name I would throw out there that I honestly would really like to see, granted, again, I don't think it's going to be a possibility, but it's Kellen Moore. And he's got connections to this city. He's got a guy over in Dallas who has had a lot of success calling plays and as a quarterback guru over there who's had success with Dak Prescott. Again, I don't think you're going to be able to pry him away, though. That's a tough sell as well. Another name I've seen thrown out there is the quarterback coach for the Los Angeles Chargers. And this is a guy that has local connections, doesn't have connections with Dan Campbell or Brad Holmes, but does have local connections. And local fans may not like it so much, but it's Pep Hamilton. I don't know if you know that name at all, but he was the passing game coordinator for the University of Michigan with guys like Shea Patterson, John O'Korn, Wilton Spate, those names. So he may not be as popular here with the U of M fans because of his lack of success with the Wolverines. Granted, not the greatest bunch of quarterbacks that he had, but either way, he is a guy who is able to take quarterbacks and turn them into something. He obviously made great progress in development with Justin Herbert in his rookie year. Again, for a situation where we could be looking at a rookie quarterback or maybe needing to push Matthew Stafford to the next level, a guy like that may not be that bad. And that's why
Don't forget he was the OC with the Colts, too. And that was when they actually had a good offense.
Yes.
That was when Andrew Luck was there.
Pep Hamilton, or, just a guy, a coordinator that the coordinator I envision is a guy who is good in the passing game, but also good and able to mix things up, willing to see that you have an effective running game and knowing how to put it together, but a guy who's able to work with quarterbacks and really, really develop them and take them to the next level. That's who I would look for in my offensive coordinator.
You bring him up, and it made me immediately think of, wait a minute, who is the quarterback's coach for the Saints? Because they have pretty seamless transitions at the quarterback position when Drew Brees gets hurt. And
Taysom Hill wasn't the greatest passer.
They made it work, man. They made it work.
It wasn't pretty, but they made it work. Granted, Jameis Winston had a great little razzle-dazzle pass to a wide-open receiver for a touchdown in that game. But.
So I'm like, wait, let's who is that? And then it's Joe Lombardi. So I immediately jumped off that train.
Oh man, Lions fans have nightmares about that guy. Remember how excited everyone was and how highly touted he was to be the play caller here, and
we're getting a Lombardi.
And then, oh god, it was terrible.
But my question for you is: at the beginning of this search, one of the main things that Sheila Ford Hamp and Rod Wood had talked about looking for, a key characteristic of their ideal candidate was experience. They hired a rookie GM, a rookie head coach, and now the head coach is hiring a rookie defensive coordinator. Well, Aaron Glenn he's been a general manager with Houston. That's the Houston Stallions of the Lone Star Football League.
Nice. Great experience there.
But what are your thoughts on just the idea of we're going complete babyface across the board with our coaching staff and with our front office?
I'm not even only going to say it's possible. I actually think it's likely at this point in terms of the heads. In terms of the heads up there, we talk about Brad Holmes being a rookie GM. We talk about Dan Campbell being a rookie head coach, and then we have Aaron Glenn as a rookie DC. The reason I think it's likely is because Dan Campbell's looking for guys that he sees potential in, because that's exactly what he's trying to push out there. Is he's trying to show his potential and that he can be successful. So he's going to try to look for guys that he knows have the chance to take the next step and be successful as well. And Aaron Glenn is one of those guys. And I think it's going to be the same with the OC hire. So I definitely think it's a really strong possibility that we could be seeing rookie head coach, OC, and DC here.
How much of an appetite do you think there is for Lions fans in terms of watching these guys learn on the job? That's the one thing I'm worried about is who's going to be the adult in the room at this stage.
I don't necessarily know that let's just say the patience level will probably be low.
Yeah.
However, I do think that there is a large sector of Lions fans that say, screw it, we've tried everything else, maybe this will finally work. And I mean, I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of a little bit in that boat. I like to see the Lions trying something different. You know what I mean? And hiring a rookie GM and a rookie head coach sounds like, this is exactly what we did last time, but it is and it isn't, because it's not the same. We're not trying to mold ourselves after a different team. It's not like we hired a Patriot or a Saints GM or assistant GM and brought in a Saints coach and then another Saints coach. And, we hired a guy from LA who then hired a coach from another organization who has his personal connections that he's going to utilize and bring in his staff. So we're taking pieces from other successful franchises and taking guys at face value and digging and finding out what they truly are and how they can truly be successful, and are they actually any good, more so than, oh, this is what the Patriots did, so let's take as much of their pieces over here and see if we can rebuild it that way. No, we're allowing these guys to build things in their mold and trying to figure out who is actually good at their job and trying to give these guys a shot to be good at the job. So it's similar, but it's not, because it's not building it after the way another team did. It's building it our way, which is what I said we had to do. We have to build this the Lions way, not the Patriot way, not the Saints way, not the Chiefs way. It has to be built in our image, in our way, and hiring rookie GMs and rookie coaches allows them to kind of put their stamp on things and develop and build things their way and in their image, so again, that's why I'm not as worried about it.
I feel that. And I mean, I kind of agree with you too. It's just, there's also the worry of diving. They went all in with it. They put all their chips in the middle of the table of, all right, give me all the rooks and let's see what happens. Kind of what the Pistons are doing.
Yeah.
Right? Well, in terms of their players instead of what
not their whole organization.
Yeah. But speaking of the Pistons,
I do think, hang on, before we move over, I do think that we do need to bring in some level of experience into this locker room and coaching situation.
Yeah. That's how I was hoping to get a little more of an experience, OC. But
because, I'm
aware it's probably not going to happen.
the lack of experience or rookie-ness, dash-ness of this whole situation goes even further than Brad Holmes, because Chris Spielman's a rookie in his situation. Like, Sheila Ford's still pretty new to her situation as an owner. Like, there's inexperience at every level with this organization right now. So we do need to bring in some, maybe the quarterbacks coach you bring in is a guy who's worked with a lot of quarterbacks in this league, or maybe the linebacker coach is a guy who has a lot of experience working with linebackers in this league. Something along those lines, that there's a level of experience surrounding this and kind of helping this thing continue to mold and grow. And so I don't think we can just hire rookie coaches all over the place. I do think we have to kind of balance it out a little bit, but I am excited to see what we have coming forward. So let's go on and switch over to the Pistons now.
All right, real quick, let's kick it off with the guy we talked about last week. That's Sekou Doumbouya. Still struggling, and some of it is on him, but a lot of it is just on not being able to consistently get on the floor. But again, like we said last week, the minutes on the floor haven't exactly been pretty. Nope. Now, Dwane Casey did come out and say that he wants to get Sekou more minutes. He did talk a little bit about Sekou's defense being a major thing holding him back, and he also talked about how they want to play more zone so he can get in a little more, despite the defensive shortcomings. But what's really irking me now is, like, Sekou's not the only guy on this roster who has shortcomings in his skill sets. I mean, Blake Griffin has been atrocious.
Blake Griffin's not being paid $1 million at most. Yeah. Like, Blake Griffin's a guy who makes $40 million a year. You have to play him.
But it's not just Blake, though. You got like Jahlil Okafor. Okafor is being handed minutes, not really doing anything. Isaiah Stewart should be playing more minutes than Jahlil Okafor on a nightly basis. So we're talking about a guy earning his minutes. So I find it really weird that Dwane Casey saw about how he loves what Sekou Doumbouya is doing in practice, and he loves the energy he brings, but then at the same time turning around and saying we need to find a way to find minutes for him without actually finding minutes for him. What are your thoughts on the whole situation with Sekou? Do you think that, and I've asked this question before on this pod, do you think that this coaching staff has kind of given up at that when it comes to Sekou?
I'm starting to feel like the writing is starting to show up on the wall a little bit with Sekou Doumbouya. I'm not going to lie to you, and it is disappointing. I do want to see him succeed, and I do want him to be a part of this organization. But as what we're seeing right now is he's literally just not getting playing time, and him and Dwane Casey saying I love what he's doing in practice, I love his energy and stuff. That's all fine and dandy that he says that, and I like that he praises his players. But at the same time, is that actually true, or is that just a coach trying to prop up his player?
Yeah, we don't know.
Because we don't see what goes on in practice every day. And you bring up the fact that Blake Griffin's been atrocious. Again, he's making $40 million a year. Jahlil Okafor. Yes, Isaiah Stewart deserves to have the minutes more than him, but there is an aspect of Isaiah Stewart is very raw, makes a lot of mistakes.
That is true.
And you don't necessarily want to have a guy like that in developing these bad habits because of his mistakes and his lack of experience by putting him in for extended periods of time and developing this muscle memory that just we don't want him to have. The thing that I'm honestly, I think this kind of goes beyond Sekou Doumbouya a little bit, and I'm a little bit curious as to why the roster is shaking up the way it is, or the playing time is shaking up the way it is. Like, Wayne Ellington played 28 minutes the other night. He played well. Don't get me wrong. He shot great, 7 to 12 from the field, 7 to 11 from outside with 24 points. Like, he was the best player on the floor for the Pistons.
For someone who just stands at the 3-point line, he played well.
Outside of Jeremy Grant, yeah. But exactly, like, he played pretty damn well. But again, why? Saddiq Bey played 4 minutes. I don't understand the idea behind playing Wayne Ellington 28 minutes and Saddiq Bey 4 minutes. Like, that it doesn't jive with me there. Like, it doesn't make sense for what this organization's trying to do. Guys like Saddiq Bey who have earned their minutes, and yeah, albeit they're not playing as well as they were, but we want to get them into the flow of things and develop them and have them continue to grow. And playing guys like Wayne Ellington, who we know what they are. And it may have just been a situation with Wayne Ellington where he had the hot hand. We're going to play him, whatever. But if I were to see this continue, that would worry me. Like, that would give me some cause for concern because, again, like, this is a team that is trying to build some young talent here and develop a core. Why are we going to play guys like Wayne Ellington that they're not going to be a part of the future of this franchise in any way? Like, it wouldn't make sense.
That's exactly what you're hoping, is that it was a hot hand approach just for one game kind of thing and not really a trend. That's what we're hoping. However,
well, I mean, he played 26 minutes against the Heat the prior game.
Yeah.
Sadiq Bey played 11.
Isaiah Stewart's minutes were down from last game in Monday night's game.
Yes, he played 19 in the first game against the Heat, and I believe 11 the second game. And then looking at, again, Wayne Ellington only played 14 minutes the prior against the Bucks, and Sadiq Bey did play 20.
Yeah.
So there is something that's nice about that. Isaiah Stewart and Jao Okafor. Isaiah Stewart against the Bucks played more minutes than Jao Okafor as well. So maybe it's just a situation where he's rotating guys in and out, giving the vets some run, allowing them to get their, stretch their legs out, giving a break to the younger guys, because this is a condensed season. It is rapid fire basketball, so giving the young guys some breathers is fine. But then again, though, I just want to see the young guys. I don't need to see Wayne Ellington. And Jao Okafor is a different situation because he is a guy who is trying to revitalize his career. He's still young, technically, even though the guy's been in the league forever. But I want to see more of Sadiq Bey, more of Isaiah Stewart, more of Sekou Doumbouya. These guys need time to play and develop. And the whole Sekou Doumbouya situation does worry me quite a bit because that straight up just sounds like a missed draft pick at this point. Because he's not getting playing time. Whereas guys like Sadiq Bey on most nights does get playing time. Guys like Isaiah Stewart is getting solid playing time, especially a lot more than he was early in the season, but Sekou's not getting any of it.
Yeah.
And that is what worries me.
And yeah, and like you're saying, like you're getting close to being worried that this is a missed draft pick. Obviously, I think it's still too early to call him a bust at this point, but like it gets to a point where you're wondering, is he doing something in practice to not, despite what Dwane Casey's saying, is he doing something in practice to bar him from getting on the floor? Because it seems like every rookie has at least a couple times this season gotten the chance at big minutes, except for Saban Lee, the second round pick. But like that he's a
nobody really expects that.
Yeah. So yeah,
I thought they were going to have to play him out of necessity.
Yeah. But I do want to talk about Blake Griffin for a bit. He has been much worse than he has been at any point since coming to Detroit. It really does look like Father Time is catching up with him a little bit. Ed Reed certainly did not pull back any punches during the telecast for the Heat when talking about Blake Griffin.
No.
I feel bad for the guy, man.
I don't. I mean, I do, but I don't. Yeah, makes $40 million. What's there to feel bad for him?
Well, true. I'm really starting to get worried that there's really no hope.
Value there.
Yeah, there's really no hope for moving Blake Griffin at any point. It's what we said when we got him. Like, this thing has steadily gone downhill from day one. We had some uptick games, but like you started off high in its first like half season, and like the next season that we're at a high point, and then from there just gone downhill as his contract is going higher and higher and higher. It's exactly what we said when that trade was made, and it's coming to fruition. It doesn't look like this downhill slope is going to get altered at any point. So I'm really getting worried that there's nothing we can salvage in terms of trade value of Blake Griffin, and we're going to start to pay people to take him if we actually want to trade him.
At this point, it is starting to look like that. Granted, maybe next year when he is on the final year of his deal, then maybe he will have some value there because it's like a $44 million expiring contract, which that carries value in itself. But as of right now, no, there is no value in Blake Griffin. I hate to say it, but he's a waste of minutes at this point. Like he's a waste of space on the floor. He doesn't really provide anything to this team. He doesn't help the young guys develop. He's taking shots away from these young guys, and he's not the same guy that he was before. And it's disappointing because, again, we are paying him so much money, and we do want him to develop or not develop, but we do want him to play well this year, so he does have value and we can trade him away. But it's not panning out to be that. And right now there is no value. The only value we get out of him is in his final year of his deal at this point. So it's making me nervous because I was hoping that this would be a guy that would play well in the first half of the year. We could trade him and get some nice draft capital or a nice young piece out of it. But it's not looking that way. He looks immovable. He looks entirely unmovable at this point.
So my question to you is it time to take the approach of Blake Griffin that we're doing with Derrick Rose, where we got to stop playing him 30-plus minutes a night and even possibly contemplate bringing him off the bench with Rose and playing him in spurts? And because Derrick Rose plays, he hasn't been as consistent this year. He's shown that he's at his best when we throw him out there in spurts. And maybe that's what we got to do with Blake Griffin. Do you agree with that?
I agree with half of what you said. Yes, I do think that we need to start treating him more like Derrick Rose in the sense of we don't need to play him 35 minutes a game. He needs to be playing less than 30 minutes a game. Rest those knees. He may be more effective in that role.
Maybe you can
Bringing him off the bench, though, you have to make the argument, and I'll make an argument as to why it's different in Derrick Rose's situation, but you have to have the argument that someone else deserves that spot when it comes to Blake Griffin, because Sekou Boya certainly hasn't charged to earn that role just yet. And so I don't know who else you would put at the 4 to...
Would you start the duo of Sadiq Bey and Jeremy Grant at 3-4?
Yes, I would. I would love to see that. Yes, absolutely. It'd be small ball, for sure small ball, but I'd love to see it. It'd be great. But in the case with Derrick Rose, nobody else has technically earned that spot, even though Killian Hayes had it. But Derrick Rose has played in that role for a long time. Blake Griffin's never played in that role, so that's the one difference there.
Yeah, that's true too. And there's also the aesthetic look of getting a $40 million guy to come off the bench. But
yeah, there is that as well. But again, I don't think it right now playing Blake Griffin 30, 35, 40 minutes a game is helping anybody. I think it's just making things look even worse. But considering the Pistons are looking at, a situation where youth is key and trying to find outcasts and seeing if we can turn them around and develop something out of them like Josh Jackson, Jao Okafor, guys like that, seeing what we can get there. There is another name who has kind of come out there, and this is actually a name we've talked about on this podcast a couple of years ago as a guy that the Pistons could potentially have targeted in the draft.
This is who I wanted them to use the pick they got for Tony Snell, or in the Tony Snell trade.
Yes.
They got the... what was it, the 30th overall pick in that draft?
Yes, this is a guy that has a lot of potential, but has struggled in Cleveland. And the Cleveland Cavaliers have talked about they're looking to move him now after a recent outburst with team officials. But Kevin Porter Jr., a guy, like I mentioned, that we wanted the Pistons to target late in the first round a couple of years ago, bringing him in with a change of scenery to Detroit, a guy who would probably get a lot of minutes to begin with because we don't really have much at the point guard position. Would you be intrigued by the Pistons bringing in a guy like Kevin Porter Jr.?
I would love Michael Porter Jr.
Michael Porter Jr. would be awesome, but Kevin Porter Jr. To see what he could potentially develop into. This is a year of youth development and seeing what we can find, and maybe that can be something with Kevin Porter. Would you like to see the Pistons try and go after him, considering at this point he probably could be pretty cheap?
One of the knocks of Kevin Porter coming in was the attitude issue. So there is part of me, it's like, well, it's concerning that the reason he's being cut from a team right now is because of an attitude. But when you look into what happened, like, okay, yeah, he's definitely in the wrong, but I also kind of get it. Like, he had a screaming match with team officials because they moved his locker to an auxiliary and they gave his locker to Taurean Prince when they traded for Taurean Prince. I'm like, it's kind of disrespectful.
It is disrespectful.
But at the same time, I get it. Like, Taurean Prince probably gets priority over Kevin Porter Jr. just based on how much he's going to play.
Yeah.
So, but this is kind of what the Pistons were about in the Bad Boys years. This is kind of what the Pistons were about in the Going to Work crew years. And this is starting to become what the Pistons are about now with bringing in a guy like Josh Jackson, guys like Jahlil Okafor. Josh Jackson kind of had an attitude problem. Jahlil Okafor just kind of hasn't worked yet in the league. But a guy like Kevin Porter Jr., if you can bring him in, like, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to be terrible, and you're going to get more draft picks.
So we're right where we are now. Yay!
Like, this is the kind of guy I like to take a chance on, where the offensive talent is undeniable with Kevin Porter Jr. Mm-hmm. It's just, can you get him in a situation where he can clean his act up? Now, you can say, well, it seems to be working for Josh Jackson in terms of he seems to be pretty reserved, and I'm like, but you can also argue that part of that is he's back home, he's got his family here, which is a good support system to keep him leveled. But at the same time, maybe he can almost, I don't think he's quite the stage yet where he can be a mentor, but maybe he can kind of give some tips to Kevin Porter Jr. on how to keep a cool head in the league. But I'm just based off his offensive talent alone and what kind of team we are right now and what kind of chances we need to be taking, I'm all for it if we want to bring him in.
If I'm Troy Weaver, I'm looking at guys all over the league like Kevin Porter Jr. and saying, I'm going to bring him in. I'm going to see what he's got. If it doesn't work, what did we lose? Because, again, it's not going to be expensive to bring him in. It's not going to hurt anything. It may hurt a little bit of chemistry if things really go awry. But, again, a lot of these guys won't be on the team in the future anyways. So what do the Pistons have to lose to go out and get guys like this, to bring them in essentially for a live tryout? Like,
yeah,
it doesn't hurt anything
long term. Just like
right, it doesn't hurt anything in my mind. And if it works out, sweet, you got a future potential like franchise talent for probably a case of laundry detergent. Like, go to Costco, grab a couple cases. Like, it's not going to cost you much. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit more than that. I would expect Pistons probably have to dish out like a second-round pick at most.
Well, no, they've already said they are going to release. Like, it's not even going to be a trade. Like, they're going.
Oh, they're just going to cut them? Sweet, yeah. It'll be free. It doesn't, like, the Pistons should be targeting guys like this all across the league, not just Kevin Porter Jr. Go out and find guys like this that are young with a lot of potential that it just hasn't been realized because they've not been given the right opportunity. They haven't found the right spot. Make Detroit the right spot for some of these guys. It's seemingly starting to work out with Josh Jackson, at least from what we've seen on most nights. Some nights, not so much, but for the most part, yes. Like,
the kid's only 20 years old. Like, he has time to grow.
Exactly. Give him a shot and let's see what we've got here.
Like, I was immature as a 20-year-old. Then again, I didn't have a bag of marijuana, loaded handgun in my glove compartment while the police pulled me over for drunk driving. And I wasn't quite that immature.
True. I mean, I can't say the same has happened to me either. But as a 20-year-old, I was young and dumb. And like, I was stupid. Whatever. I had an ego issue with 20. Everybody has an ego issue with 20. But again, this is a situation where the Pistons are in a total rebuild, and getting young pieces like this that that may or may not work, and if they do, it's like it's playing with house money because again, what do you have to lose? It's not like getting this guy is going to cause this team to miss the playoffs. Getting this guy could potentially jumpstart this rebuild.
And hey, maybe getting straight up released in his second year in the league, maybe that's a little bit of a wake up call too.
Maybe. I don't know. This goes beyond Kevin Porter. I think the Pistons should be looking for guys like this all over the league.
This is one of those low risk, high reward situations. Like, you sign him to a deal to the end, like for just till the end of the year. See if you have potential to at least, I don't want to say rehabilitate, but like get his mind right. Yeah, and if you see there's potential there to get his mind right, and if you see that like he's willing to work at it, then potential's the offense, the actual on court potential's there where you can sign him for a couple more years after that. But yeah, the live tryout there's nothing to lose there.
Especially considering we have DeLon Wright starting at point guard.
Yeah. But dude, real quick before we close out, I can't tell you because like the first wave of mock drafts has been coming out. The NBA and seeing the Pistons
getting
top.
Cade Cunningham?
Yeah, getting Cade Cunningham. I'm just like, please be real. Just
lottery gods, please work in our favor for once. Once. We're sorry for the Darko pick. We won't make the same mistake again.
But I got so annoyed when we beat the Heat over the weekend because like they're only like a couple of games behind us. But then we lost today and yesterday and made up for it. So
I think the Heat will end up getting their act together and end up towards the top of the East.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see that drop off. Like nothing much has changed.
I think it's just they haven't gotten going yet. They just give them time. They'll be back. They'll be back up there. They'll probably end up being like a 4 or 5 seed. Jimmy Butler's got to get
back to himself.
Yeah,
I still think he's a little sore from the playoffs from carrying that team.
Possibly. They'll be a 4 or 5 seed by the end of the year. I can almost guarantee it. That's not a team I'm worried about.
It's not going to matter when the Brooklyn Nets just destroy everybody.
Yeah. That team is going to be scary. Nice. If Kyrie can get his shit together, I understand guys.
Now he's going to play. Now he's going to play. He says he's excited that he's got Harden. So
I know,
now he's going to play.
Dude apparently he's got some personal shit going on. If he can get his shit together and his family life straight, that team's going to be good. Wow. I've also never seen a man recover from an Achilles tear the way Kevin Durant has. That's a completely incredible situation.
I've also never seen a man drop as much weight so quickly as James Harden has.
Not gonna lie to you, the way he looked in Houston, he honestly looked like Zion when he first got to New Orleans and was packing on the pounds from the gumbo, man. He literally looks like he's been sitting at the bar for the entire offseason. Oh my God. I just Fat James Harden is funny to look at. Yep. Because he still balls out. I mean, yeah, no, he definitely, I can definitely see him getting his shit together over in Brooklyn. And
what I'm worried about is it's going to cause more teams to tank because they're realizing it's hopeless this year.
Oh, I do too. But then again, I also don't think that team will win. You can't win with James Harden. Yeah, that style of basketball doesn't win. It's my opinion, and it's proven to be true over the entirety of his career.
But would Kyrie's like the third scorer on your team?
Yeah, it's brutal. But then again, what else do they have? I mean, Dinwiddie's out for the year. Do they still have Joe Harris, or do they trade him?
Yeah,
too?
they still got Joe Harris.
Well, there's at least one shooter. Well, and DeAndre Jordan, sure. But beyond that, I mean, what do they got? You know, they traded all of their
The bench is a bit
away.
to be desired.
Yeah, a bit.
Timothy Luwawu Cabaret.
Remember when he came into the league and we were kind of excited to see him, and then he was terrible?
I remember doing our mocks on the old show, and that was one guy I'm like, I didn't mock him Detroit. I was like, that's a guy I don't mind Detroit picking up. And then,
It's funny seeing those names like from years ago that we talked about, like, oh, the Pistons go get him, and seeing him still kind of putz around the league a bit.
Yep.
Oh, man. All right, though. That's going to call for this week, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Let us know how you feel about the Lions hires, and give us your thoughts on the Pistons as well. Andrew, thank you for joining me, and thank you to Detroit Sports Podcast. As always, we will catch you guys next week. This has been the Fan Reporters by fans.
For fans.
See you guys next week. Have a good one. Follow us on Twitter @RealFanReport. We'll catch you guys later. Peace.